Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Perhaps the next story about betrayal will be from your city, and we start. I wake up early because my body clock seems to have learned to wake me up before my alarm. I never liked getting up in the dark, but what can you do? Work, as they say, won't do itself. I'm lying in bed, looking at the cracks on the ceiling that Mark promised to fill with putty 6 months ago. He used to be very attentive. He would fix anything that annoyed me, be it a creaky step or a door handle that didn't turn well. But now my husband is so busy with his construction projects that he doesn't care about the little things in his own home. Or maybe before me too. I try to suppress this bitter thought, but it stubbornly pops up in my head. I quietly get out of bed so as not to wake Mark, and, sneaking into the bathroom, I begin to wash myself. The mirror in the bathroom is illuminated by a weak, slightly yellowish light bulb. I look at my reflection. I'm 36, but sometimes I feel much older. I don't know when exactly I became so tired, perhaps at the moment when I realized that every next day in my marriage to Mark was almost the same as the previous one. Yes, we once laughed and made plans, but now I see how life with all its bills, obligations, and endless affairs has squeezed us out like an old rag. I sigh, grab a towel to dry my face, and walk out of the bathroom. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. At such moments, I feel that silence in the house is both a blessing and a curse, as we say. On the one hand, I appreciate a couple of minutes of peace when I can be alone with my thoughts, but on the other hand, this oppressive silence once again reminds me that Mark and I have long ago lost the warm intimacy that has long cemented our union. Suddenly, I hear the long sound of a yawn. Mark tosses and turns in his sleep, then props himself up on his elbow. I can hear him trying to figure out what time it is. Grace? His voice is still hoarse from sleep. I'm here, I answer, throwing on my robe and walking into the bedroom. He squints at me. Always slightly furrowed eyebrows, a slight wrinkle between them a sign that he is constantly figuring out in his mind how to solve the next construction problem. I know he is mentally already at the facility. Sorry if I woke you up, I say with a polite smile. I just got up early. Nothing, Mark yawns and stretches. I still have to go soon. The guys didn't have time to pour the foundation on the new site yesterday, so they'll have to catch up. I listen to him and understand that again, it all comes down to work. I once loved this hard work and determination in him. But now, to be honest, it seems to me that work is more important to him than our home, than me. Maybe it's just pent-up resentment, or maybe that's how it is. Have you already had breakfast? He asks, sitting up on the bed and groping with his feet for his slippers. No, but I can cook something quickly, I answer, trying to add enthusiasm to my voice. In fact, I just want to remain silent, go to the kitchen and drink coffee alone. However, a couple of pancakes for a husband is not such a big effort. Besides, I'm still trying to bring back into our relationship at least a drop of the home comfort that connected us before. I go downstairs, turn on the coffee machine, and put the frying pan on the stove to bake pancakes. At such moments, I feel like a housewife from American magazines of the 50s, porcelain cup, patterned apron. But the reality, of course, is far from the glossy picture. I am an accountant in a local company. I keep reports and prepare balance sheets. I kind of like the work. The numbers don't lie, and there is a certain predictability in it, but it doesn't give me the fullness of life. And sometimes I think, Lord, is this really all that awaits me ahead? Mark comes down while I flip the last pancake. He nods in greeting and turns on the TV in the kitchen to listen to the morning news. The announcer's voice quietly mutters about a local incident on the highway. I place a plate in front of Mark. Thank you, he says absently, looking at the screen. Please, I answered quietly. At the same time, I noticed that he didn't even look in my direction. We eat almost in silence, only exchanging a few words about the weather and his work plans. Once upon a time, we could chat about everything in the world, ask stupid questions, make plans for the weekend. Now, it seems, we have died out, like a flame that has no one to throw more wood on. After finishing breakfast, I grab my cup of coffee and head back to the bedroom. I need to change clothes for work and at the same time pick up a folder with documents that were left over from yesterday. I go to the window and look out into the yard. We have a small house in the suburbs of Bangor, Maine, on a typical street with neat lawns and uniform mailboxes. There is a calmness on all sides, which sometimes reminds me of a swamp. Everything is quiet on the outside, but inside it can be full of hidden problems and quagmire. Grace, I'm leaving. Mark's voice reaches me from the hallway. Have a good day. I shout back. He probably didn't hear me because he didn't respond. The door slams. I'm left alone in the house again. I finish my coffee, feeling a slight bitterness on my lips. I don't know whether it's from the drink itself or from the thought that another day like this awaits me. When I leave the house, the weather is surprisingly pleasant, although it is already mid-autumn. The foliage on the trees is bright yellow, in some places already orange. The air is cool and fresh. At such moments, you want to grab a blanket, hot cider, and just admire how the leaves fall and rustle under your feet. But I'm in a hurry to the office because today we have something like a seasonal report. There we need to add up all the numbers for several clients. I start the car, an old sedan that I got from my parents. I turn on the radio station to somehow break up the silence. The singer's voice muffles out from the speakers. I drive along familiar streets, turn onto the main road, and, sitting in a traffic jam, watch how people around me begin their normal day. Ahead of the next car is a woman driving, furiously typing something on her phone. Someone honks from behind, apparently being late. I realize that this morning routine is repeated day after day, and I begin to wonder, what next? Will my life become different, or will I continue to spin in this wheel from morning to evening? I get to the office. Our accounting department is a small open space on the second floor of an old building near the city center. The boss, Mr. Donovan, is a rather old-school man. He wears a suit even if it's 30 degrees outside. Now he is standing near the cooler, sipping water. "Good morning, Grace," he greets me in his usual prim manner. "How are you feeling? Ready for a crazy day?" "Ready, Mr. Donovan," I answered with a tight but polite smile. I sit down at my desk and turn on the computer. I am greeted with a series of letters, task reminders, and emails from clients who urgently want reports and consultations. I usually sit down and quickly get to grips with the work, because numbers are the only thing that doesn't leave time for soul-searching. But today, while the system is loading, my thoughts float somewhere else. I remember how, back in college, I dreamed of something completely different. I wanted to become a journalist, write articles that really touched human hearts. But in the end, I chose accounting because it was reliable, stable, and promised constant income. And now here I am. The hours creep by slowly. I spend my breaks drinking a cup of cheap office coffee and having short conversations with my colleagues. Most of them are intently leafing through papers. Some are calling from clients, others are arguing with suppliers. No one is particularly interested in how I'm doing, and I myself have long stopped asking anyone about personal things. I feel that we all have the same problem: routine and lack of time. By lunchtime, I had already sorted out half of the mail and had almost finished summarizing one of the important reports. I decided to take a break for 10 minutes and go outside to get some fresh air. Sarah, one of our assistants, is standing on the office porch. "Hello, Grace." Also decided to run away for a couple of minutes. "Yeah," I sigh. My head is already buzzing with numbers. "So I think I'm going crazy. You know, sometimes it seems like we'll grow old behind these monitors," she says jokingly, but there is some truth in her voice. I smile awkwardly. Deep down, I know that Sarah hit the nail on the head. We stand, looking at the passing cars, and are silent each in our own thoughts. For some reason, I suddenly remember that I also have grocery shopping today, and in the evening I need to cook dinner. Ordinary, everyday worries, but they are the ones that, perhaps, do not allow you to feel a moment of freedom or a moment of real happiness. I return to my desk and continue to tap on the keys until the evening. When it's finally time to leave, I turn off the computer, stand up, and sling my bag over my shoulder, being one of the last to leave the office. It's already dusk outside, and the street smells of wet leaves. As I start the car, I think whether I should stop by for groceries now or better in the morning. But in the morning, I usually have no time for anything. So I decided to stop by the local supermarket. There is a big crowd inside, people scurrying between the shelves, pushing carts, growling at each other if someone accidentally blocks the passage. I don't want unnecessary contacts, so I try to quickly find everything I need. Chicken breasts, vegetables for salad, a bag of coffee. I shovel everything into the basket and head to the checkout. At the checkout stand in front of me are spouses around my age. They laugh about something, look at each other, and hug. I'm suddenly filled with jealousy, not for this particular couple, but for their lightness and cheerfulness. Although, who knows what their real relationship is? Maybe it's ostentatious intimacy. But I notice how a man playfully pinches a woman's side, and she laughs in response. And I understand that I haven't experienced this for a long time. This is a small thing, but it's these little things that make you feel loved and noticed. I finish my shopping and leave the store. It's almost dark outside. I notice that the street lights in our neighborhood are long overdue for a replacement. There's barely enough light to see where I'm going. I start the car and head towards the house. From time to time, the glance falls on the phone. Is there a message from Mark? Maybe he'll finish early and we can at least have dinner together. But the screen is dark, no notifications. When I arrive home, I see that the windows are dark. No Brand yet. He's probably still at a construction site or on his way back from some meeting. I exhale tiredly, drag the bags into the kitchen, and begin to sort out my purchases. The house greeted me with cold air and empty walls. It feels like it's not lived in. Perhaps I myself have long become only its inhabitant and not a full-fledged owner, because I no longer feel real warmth here. I heat up the frying pan, chop the chicken, and let the potatoes cook. While I'm frying, I'm trying to distract myself from all sorts of heavy thoughts, but my head is still swarming. What's the point? Why does life slip into this routine? What am I doing wrong? I want to call one of my friends, chat, get distracted, but our paths have long diverged. Some have moved, others have families and children, and it's inconvenient to complain when everyone is busy with their own problems. A little later, I hear the front door slam. Mark is finally back. 6 days a week, he is on site almost all the time, and on Sundays, he often finds a reason to go. I walk up to him in the corridor, he takes off his shoes, shakes dust off his trousers, and mutters, "Hello, Grace. It's been a tough day." "Hello," I answered, trying to find the strength to smile. "What's it like at a construction site?" "Yes, everything is fine, just a blockage. I had to stay longer to accept the delivery of building materials." He goes into the bathroom, and I return to the stove. I check the vegetables and turn off the burner. What could I say to start some kind of conversation? But nothing comes to mind. Mark returns a minute later, his hair still damp from a quick wash. He sits down at the table. "Are you going to have dinner?" I ask, placing a plate in front of him. "Yes, sure. Thank you." He sighs and starts eating. We are sitting at the same table, but it's like we're not together. We are trying to exchange phrases about his work and mine. I mention that our office is in the middle of the annual reporting period, and he nods automatically, as if that's enough to demonstrate understanding. I talk about our household bills that need to be paid. He whispers, "Yeah," and continues to chew. It seems that only everyday life connects us. After dinner, he climbs onto the sofa with a tablet turned on to the next construction site and methodically looks through articles and chats with colleagues. I feel like I don't want to sit in silence with him. Then I get up and start washing the dishes. Streams of hot water flow down the plates, and I look out the window above the sink. It's dark there, only the light from rare street lights and the fireflies of the headlights of passing cars. At such moments, I ask myself, how is it that we suddenly have no topic to talk about? When the dishes are washed, I sit down on a chair by the window, run my palms through my hair, noticing that it is slightly damp from the steam. My head is empty, but my heart is heavy. Mark is reading something out loud behind me, or rather, he seems to be thinking, but clearly does not address me. I don't react, I just sit and listen to the echoing sound of silence in our house. I was once warmed by the thought that we would live happily ever after, maybe we would have children, and this house would be filled with laughter and running around. But Mark hasn't talked about any children for a long time, and I myself didn't dare raise this topic because there was still anxiety inside. What if we can't cope? What can I say? Even without children, I often experience a feeling of loneliness. Sometimes it seems to me that I haven't really lived for a long time, but I'm just completing lists of tasks, going according to a plan that I've never reviewed. This weighs on me day after day, and I become more and more frozen, as if I am plunging into the swamp that I was thinking about in the morning. Bedtime is approaching. Mark goes upstairs. I hear him go to the bathroom, then move back and forth, and finally lie down in bed. I turn off the kitchen light, turn off the TV, which he had forgotten on the news channel, and follow. When I go into the bedroom, Mark is already dozing. I sit down on the edge of the bed and look at him. Yes, he is still the same person whom I once fell madly in love with. But it seems that the spark that connected us has disappeared. And I'm incredibly scared that this is how we will live in parallel, existing in the same space, but with different lives. I lie down next to her, try to make myself more comfortable, but something prevents me from falling asleep. I hear his quiet, measured breathing, and I think that I have so little joy left in my life. Sometimes it seems to me that if I don't find a way out, then someday I'll just stop feeling anything at all. But just recently, even a few years ago, my eyes were burning. I was dreaming, hoping. Where did it all go? In essence, I know the answer. Everyday life, financial difficulties, long workdays, shared silence, all this little by little eats away the most valuable thing in a relationship. I lie there, trying to calm down, closing my eyes. Tomorrow the same circle will repeat again. Office, bills, dinner, a few words with my husband, and all over again. Perhaps this really is life, and others live this way. But I am tormented by the feeling that somewhere deeper within me there is a need for attention, for warmth, for the feeling that I can still do something. I want to find this something, although I still have no idea how. Finally, I break out of this stream of thoughts and turn on my side so as not to look at Mark, as if I'm afraid to meet his gaze, even if he's sleeping. I cling to hope. Maybe this is just a rough patch. Maybe you should have a romantic evening or go on vacation for a couple of days. Maybe it can still be restored. But for this, you also need the desire of your husband. You need a spark. You need this very love, which, I'm afraid, has already disappeared somewhere along the way. Before finally falling asleep, a detail comes to mind. Tomorrow is Saturday, and usually I go shopping or sort out old things at home that should have been thrown away long ago. Mark will most likely leave for work again, even though it's his day off. And everything will go in circles. I take a deep breath, feeling my heart beat harder than usual. Finally, I still find the strength to close my eyes, surrendering to the power of sleep. And with a very last glimmer of consciousness, I think, is this really my life? So empty, so the same. I peck at you like a bird tired of looking for seeds of hope. Sleep comes slowly through the thick melancholy that has been with me for several years now, day after day, permeating my reality. So ends another evening in Bangor, Maine. I am Grace Miller, 36 years old, an accountant living in a quiet suburb where there is no place for noisy events and strong emotions. I didn't think I'd ever be in the gym again. At the university, I did aerobics and ran around the stadium to keep myself in shape, but after the wedding this habit disappeared somewhere along with the student excitement. Now, after 10 years of marriage, a strange thought ripened in my head. Why not go back to training? Probably, I was pushed by a strong desire to somehow break out of the routine. And to be honest, I needed a place where I could leave all my worries at the door and be with myself, even if there were dumbbells, treadmills, and strangers around. That Saturday morning, Mark, as always, went to the construction site, although it was supposedly a day off. Remembering my idea, I quickly threw on sports leggings that I found in the back of the closet, sneakers, and an old sweatshirt. On the way to the car, I caught myself feeling a little nervous. What if I look ridiculous among trained people? But after taking a deep breath, I decided to put these worries aside and just try. The gym I was heading to was called The Base. I had heard about it in passing before. It was said that the owner was a former professional baseball player who gave up the sport after an injury and opened the place to anyone who wanted to stay in shape. I was expecting a typical environment: rows of heavy equipment, barbells, gym mats, the smell of sweat, and rubber flooring. In general, everything that is usually an average gym. Once inside, I was a little confused at first. There was no loud music and crowds of people at the entrance that I had imagined. All that could be heard was a soft rhythmic track, and there were a couple of people in the lobby. Someone was signing up for membership. Someone was rummaging through a locker, changing their shoes. On the walls hung posters of baseball teams, photographs of local tournaments, and, of course, sports symbols. Near the reception desk stood a man about my age, large but fit, wearing a black t-shirt. I immediately noticed his confident posture, broad shoulders, and the friendly smile that appeared on his face when he saw me. "Good morning. How can I help?" he asked. There was warmth in his voice, as if he was truly happy about every new visitor. I, uh, wanted to sign up for training. "Well, that is, for a trial lesson," I said awkwardly, trying to collect my thoughts. "My name is Grace." "Nice to meet you, Grace. I'm Cole. Welcome to the base." He extended his hand to me, and I responded with a weak handshake. As soon as his palm touched mine, I was struck for a second by the feeling that I was doing something unusual, new, and this made me feel special. "I need to fill out a couple of forms, right?" I asked, nodding at the stack of papers on the counter. "Yes, just a basic membership application, and then we'll see what areas interest you. We have functional training, a cardio zone, boxing classes, pilates, and a classic gym, of course." I took a pen and began to fill out the fields: name, age, purpose of visiting the gym. Purpose, I thought for a moment. What to write? Lose a few kilos, relieve stress, find at least some joy and a new activity in life. In the end, I came up with the modest wording, keeping fit and healthy, and gave the questionnaire to Cole. "Great," he said, briefly looking at my entry. "Do you already have any training preferences?" "Don't even know. I haven't done any sports for a long time, except for occasional walks in the morning. Maybe I should start with something easier." I smiled as if I was apologizing in advance for my clumsiness. "I suggest starting with functional exercises and light cardio. If you want, I can give you a little tour, show you where everything is, and give you some basic recommendations." "Yes, that would be great. Thank you." Cole came out from behind the counter, and we walked through the turnstile into the main hall. There was everything I expected: exercise equipment, treadmills, weight racks, benches. It smelled of rubber and disinfectant, and somewhere in the far corner metal pancakes quietly rattled against metal racks. "This is the main area," Cole explained. "People who want to pump themselves up and increase endurance work out here. If you want to start with something gentler, we have a group exercise area there." He pointed to a glass door with a poster showing various classes that week. We walked past a row of jogging paths. One was free, and Cole asked me to stand on it to see how comfortable I was. He showed how to turn it on, select the speed, and incline. I walked around a bit, feeling slightly embarrassed that he was watching my movements so closely. But I quickly realized that this was a purely professional habit. He wanted to make sure that I was doing everything right. "Well, how do you feel?" he asked when I left the path. "I feel like I'm still a complete newbie," I admitted with a wry smile. "But there's even something pleasant about it. It's like you're returning to your old self." Cole smiled back. "Great. Most people are afraid to take the first step, afraid to seem funny or clumsy. But in reality, everything is much simpler. The main thing is to want it, and the rest will follow." I felt support in his words, so sincere that I had not heard for a long time. In recent years, we communicated with Mark rather on business. There were no such spiritual notes. I momentarily found myself thinking that I liked talking to Cole and quickly pushed this feeling aside, deciding that I was just glad of human warmth. We continued our walk around the hall. Cole told us in what cases it is better to stretch, how to breathe correctly during strength loads, and why it is important to monitor your technique. I couldn't help but notice that he spoke in a calm and confident tone, without looking arrogant or self-confident. On the contrary, there was something in his manner that was endearing. Maybe we should start with a basic warm-up and a few exercises to warm up the muscles of the legs and back, he suggested when we stopped in a free corner. Yes, of course, I answered, trying to hide the slight awkwardness. We did a few squats, bends, and stretched our arms. Cole immediately corrected my posture and showed me how to keep my back straight. His hands touched my shoulders, and I suddenly felt a quiet trembling from the unexpected contact. No, it wasn't anything intimate. He was just showing how to straighten your shoulder blades. But it was as if something was vibrating inside me, probably because it had been so long since I had felt someone touch me in a caring way without irritation or haste. Is that better? He asked as I arched my back and tried to maintain a straight line. Yes, thank you. I looked away, feeling my cheeks turn a little red. After a short warm-up, Cole gave me a couple of exercises with light dumbbells on my hands. I agreed, albeit timidly. Trying not to show that it was hard for me, I began to lift dumbbells. I felt how I was gradually warming up, how muscles that had not worked at full strength for a long time began to respond. Somewhere deep inside me, the long-forgotten vigor that I experienced when I was younger and more enthusiastic awoke. After about 20 minutes of such approaches, I was already breathing more often than I would like. Cole pushed a bottle of water towards me. "Don't overdo it. This is just the beginning," he said. "Yes, you're right," I answered, smiling and wiping sweat from my forehead with a towel. "Suddenly, tomorrow, I won't be able to get out of bed." He laughed good-naturedly. "There will be a little soreness, but that's normal. We have a salt room and a small massage room if needed, although I recommend just coming in tomorrow and doing some light stretching." We both sat down to rest on a bench against the wall. For a few seconds, I enjoyed the fact that my pulse was slowly returning to normal. I looked at the people around us. Someone was reaching for the crossbar, someone was curling up on the mat. Everyone was busy with their own business, and no one cared about me. I liked it no one looked at me with ridicule or condemnation. "I heard you're a former baseball player," I said, trying to start a conversation and better get to know the man who greeted me so warmly. "They say you had an injury." He shrugged. "Yes, it is. I played in the minor leagues, hoping to get into a more serious team, but everything collapsed due to a shoulder injury. I went through rehabilitation, but the doctors said it was better to quit professional sports. I had to look for myself further, and I opened this hall. I've been here for 5 years now." "And you don't regret it?" I asked curiously, hoping the question wasn't too personal. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten injured then. "But you know, over these 5 years, I met a lot of good people. I've heard dozens of stories, and I think that my current life also has meaning." He turned his gaze to me. "What are you doing?" "Accounting," I answered, trying not to show in my voice all the melancholy that I usually feel when talking about my work. "At a local office. Nothing supernatural. Accounts, reports, taxes." "You work with numbers, that is." Cole nodded approvingly. "I have always believed that accountants really lack physical exercise. Numbers can be no less exhausting than carrying heavy bags." I smiled. It was nice that he understood that my work also takes a lot of effort, although from the outside it may seem boring and uncomplicated. "Yes, sometimes my head hurts at the end of the day. I decided that something needed to be changed. My husband, Mark, is constantly at construction. He is a contractor, and I can see how important his work is to him. So I thought, why don't I do something that will give me back my energy?" At the mention of his husband, Cole's face showed nothing special. He nodded calmly. I involuntarily felt some kind of prick, as if I reminded myself that I was a married woman. But we're just talking, and there's nothing like that here. It's good that I decided to try. If you want to continue, we can create a program for you. I'll be happy to help. Well, just come if you want to chat or ask questions. I'm here almost all day long. Cole chuckled. After the divorce, I immersed myself in work, so it's difficult to force me to leave these walls. I was wary for a moment. He mentioned divorce casually, but it sounded casual and calm. I felt compassion well up inside me. Some were going through a divorce, others were stuck in a marriage that felt like a daydream. I suddenly wanted to say something encouraging to him, but I wasn't sure I had the right to pry into his personal life. Sorry for being so quick. You just mentioned your husband, and I decided that I could share, he explained, apparently noticing my reaction. I don't like beating around the bush. It's okay. I. I'm really interested in how you came up with the idea of opening such a hall, and now I understand better that this is not just a business for you. I said this sincerely because I felt that the way he treated this place was imbued with something more than just a desire to make money. Yes, the base is almost home for me. Glad you notice, Cole replied. Gratitude flashed in his eyes. Okay, let's make an agreement. You come on Tuesday or Thursday, when it's convenient for you, and I'll show you a couple more exercises and gradually introduce you to the normal rhythm of training. Is it coming? It's coming, I confirmed. Suddenly, inspiration arose inside me. It was as if there was something like a small spark that made me feel a little more alive than in the morning. When we returned to the counter for me to pay for my membership and get my membership card, Cole made a note in the journal. Grace Miller, huh? He asked with a smile, recording my data. Exactly, I confirmed, waiting for him to give me a plastic card with the hall's logo. Welcome to the team, Grace, he said, handing me a card. I'm waiting for you on any convenient day. I hope you enjoy it here. I thanked him, and as I was about to leave, I remembered that I had completely forgotten to ask for a phone number to register for classes. But he got ahead of me. Here's a business card. If you decide that it is more convenient for you to arrange a time in advance, just call. I nodded, hid the business card in my pocket, and felt a strange, pleasant warmth spreading in my chest. Not some kind of storm of emotions, but a light breeze of hope that perhaps there will be a small outlet in my life. Why am I so happy? Flashed through my head. It's just going to the gym. But I understood. It was not only the hall, but also the way Cole talked to me, how attentively he looked and helped. It was such a contrast to my normal life. Walking out into the parking lot, I breathed in the fresh air. A slight trembling in my legs reminded me that today I received a load that was unusual for my body, but at the same time, I felt a surge of strength. Perhaps this is the very feeling when you realize that you have started to change at least something. Let it be a small step, but still. I got into the car, started the engine, and looked at myself in the mirror. His hair was tousled, his face was slightly sweaty, but something new appeared in his eyes, a spark of life that had not made itself felt for a long time. Maybe I should really come here, I thought, and it doesn't matter what Mark says. This is my decision, my time. Today I was in such a hurry to go to the gym, as if some invisible force was pulling me there. In the morning, everything went wrong. I barely woke myself up with a cup of black coffee, almost forgot my keys on the table, and was pretty nervous before the workday. But having finished my business and quickly changed clothes in the car, I literally flew into the base. I wanted to hear a friendly, "Hello, Grace," from Cole as quickly as possible to see his calm face. And although I knew that I shouldn't dwell on him, a quiet anticipation arose inside me as I walked along the corridor leading to the locker room. When I entered the hall, Cole was standing near the counter and talking with some man, an acquaintance of his. Noticing me, he nodded and smiled a light but warm smile that seemed to say, "I'm glad to see you." I nodded in response, tried to return the same smile, and quickly walked to the treadmill, trying to appear calm. But inside, I already had butterflies. A minute later, Cole came up. "Hello, how was your day?" "Hi," I answered, slowing down the speed of the track and catching my breath. To be honest, it turned out to be difficult. Nothing catastrophic, but under the rubble of numbers the mood is lost. "Well, let's help you get it back," he said, lightly patting me on the shoulder. "I was planning on giving you some cardio and then we'll do dumbbells. How do you like it?" I nodded. I really liked that Cole never rushed, did not rush, but tried to adapt to my well-being. Over the past few weeks, I have been regularly appearing in the gym, and we have already managed to establish a peculiar rhythm of classes. He knew when I could handle a little more load and when I needed to slow down. And most importantly, he communicated with me as if I was not just a client for him, but a person whom he respected. The training was surprisingly easy. We did a series of exercises for the arms and back, rows, bench presses with light weights, a couple of sets with elastic bands. I felt pleasantly tired, but not completely exhausted, as sometimes happened in the first days. Listening to Cole's advice on proper breathing, I periodically found myself admiring him when he showed me how to do the exercise. There was a confident fluidity in his movements that you wanted to watch. But as soon as he looked at me, I lowered my eyes in embarrassment, as if I had been caught at the scene of a crime. When we finished, Cole suggested, "Listen, if you have time, maybe we can have a cup of coffee in the cafeteria across the street. I'm dying of caffeine." I froze for a second. For some reason, my heart beat a little faster. On the one hand, nothing strange. We're just going to go have coffee together. This is not a romantic date. But on the other hand, I understood that I had not done anything like this for a long time. I had not sat in a cafe with a man who was clearly attractive to me, and not in the performance of my household duties. And something inside told me, "Yes, agree, it's just coffee." "Yes, that's not a bad idea," I replied, trying to speak as evenly as possible. "I'll just have time to get home before dark if I don't stay up late." He nodded, and we left the hall together. There was a breath of coolness from the street, twilight was already spreading across the sky, and the lanterns began to light up along the road. The cafeteria was literally across the street, a low building with a large window and a modest neon sign, "Cafe and More." It was warm inside, smelling of roasted grains and some kind of baked goods. Almost all the tables were occupied, but we were lucky to find a free one by the window. "What are you going to do?" Cole asked, taking the menu out of the metal stand on the table. "A latte, perhaps," I said, glancing briefly at the page with desserts, but decided that today I would do without sweets. He ordered himself a double espresso and, when the waitress left, leaned on the back of his chair. "So, how are you doing, Grace? Not training ones, but for real." I felt my heart skip a beat, because, in reality, things weren't so smooth for me. It seems Cole felt this, and the question itself sounded more than just polite. I shrugged. "To be honest, not really. I haven't felt it for a long time." I hesitated, searching for words. "I don't feel needed." Or perhaps it would be more correct to say, "I don't feel joy in what I do." It's as if I'm living according to a schedule that I'm already tired of, but I don't know how to change it. Cole listened attentively, without interrupting. There was an understanding in his gaze, as if he himself had once gone through a similar state. "I understand you," he said when I stopped. "You know, it's somewhat similar to what I felt after the injury. Then my plans collapsed, and I could not find a foothold." "What helped you?" I asked, leaning forward to hear better. At first I resisted and broke, but in the end I realized that I needed to take care of myself. Literally ask yourself, what do I want? And more importantly, what do I deserve? When I answered these questions, I began to move forward. Sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. Yes, and there were some pain points. But without this, everything would have remained frozen. I thought about how I had never seriously asked myself this question. What do I deserve? Usually I act based on what needs to be done, what is expected of me, or what will be the right thing to do. I remembered our conversations with Mark, where we often heard, "It's necessary," or "It will be better this way." But rarely, "I want to." Perhaps that is why I feel constantly tired of myself. The waitress brought our drinks. We thanked her, and then Cole picked up his tiny espresso cup and smiled. "Well, for small victories." "For small victories," I repeated, lightly touching his cup with my mug. We took a sip. The coffee was hot and aromatic, And at that moment, I felt like the ice that had been accumulating for many months was slightly melting inside me. Cole looked at me over his cup and suddenly said quietly, but very confidently, "You know, Grace, you deserve more than just being part of someone's routine." This phrase hit the mark. I literally froze, feeling my heart contracting and expanding at the same time from these words. He didn't say anything directly about Mark or my marriage, didn't judge me, didn't try to persuade me to change anything. I simply said what I myself was thinking about, but was afraid to formulate, and it seemed to pierce me. Yes, I really feel like someone else's detail in Mark's life, his usual background, and not a person with his own desires and feelings. "Thank you," I whispered, not knowing what else to say. Cole nodded and leaned back in his chair, never taking his eyes off me. I even felt a little embarrassed, as if he was looking into my soul. But there was not a drop of condemnation or pressure, only quiet sympathy and understanding. "Sorry if I went too far with words," he said after a couple of seconds. "I just get the feeling that you are carrying a load within you that you can no longer bear." And well, I guess I just don't like seeing good people break under the weight of other people's expectations. "You didn't overdo it," I replied. "On the contrary, I appreciate your sincerity. It's been a long time since anyone asked me what I wanted, and he didn't say that I deserved anything." We both fell silent, each lost in our own thoughts. I tried not to lower my eyes, not to hide. I felt good next to him, but also a little scared of how drawn I was to him. I'm married, no matter how cold my relationship with Mark has become. But Cole, he just talked to me, just listened, and it gave me both guilt and gratitude. The cafeteria was cozy. The lights of passing cars flashed outside the window, and light steam rose above our cups. I sometimes caught the reflection of our table in the glass of the shop window and saw us sitting opposite each other, bowing our heads in conversation. There was something right about it, as if we had known each other for a long time, as if we understood each other from the first minutes. "Listen, if anything happens, I'm here," Cole said, finishing his espresso and putting the cup back on the saucer. "Sometimes you just need someone who will listen, without giving advice, without demanding anything in return." "I feel it." "Thank you," I replied. And she added, gathering her courage, "It's easy with you." I haven't felt this feeling for a long time, when you're not afraid to say something unnecessary. Mark and I haven't talked much seriously lately. Cole frowned slightly, as if searching for words, but ultimately remained silent. Apparently, he didn't want to get into the topic of my marriage and cause me even more confusion, and I was grateful to him for this. Hearing my mobile phone ring, I glanced at the screen. Mother. In recent years, she and I have rarely called each other without reason, but now it seems like something urgent. I waved it off. "I'll call you back later," and hung up the call, not wanting to interrupt this moment. "Maybe you need to answer?" Cole asked with concern in his voice. "No, everything is fine. I'll call you back a little later." We agreed that we would soon leave, but for now we would finish the small cookies that were on the plate with the coffee. I felt like I was in some other reality where I wasn't burdened by accounting numbers, where I wasn't waiting to sort things out with my husband at home, and where I could just be myself, even for half an hour. Finally, having paid, we left the cafe. On the street, the night was coming into its own. The coolness was noticeably tingling my cheeks. I looked at my watch and realized that I had to go. I still needed to run to the supermarket and buy some groceries. "Thank you for the evening, Cole," I said, turning to him. "And for the words. I think they will stay with me for a long time." He smiled, shrugging his shoulders slightly, as if it were an insignificant detail. "I'm glad that we were able to talk not only about training, and remember, you can always write to me. After all, I have your number for class reminders," he winked, trying to lighten the mood. "Yes, sure. See you in the hall," I answered, feeling a warm but anxious wave growing in my chest. We froze for a couple of seconds, and for a moment I thought that he might want to hug me goodbye. But nothing happened. We simply said goodbye with a nod and each headed to our car. I sat behind the wheel, my hands shaking slightly as I started the engine. All the way home, I couldn't get his phrase out of my head. You deserve more than just being part of someone's routine. I understood that he was talking about me, but at the same time he touched on the history of my relationship with Mark. Not because I wanted to destroy it, but because I saw despair and emptiness in my eyes. I've noticed that lately I've been trying to come home later than usual. It's as if something inside me resists the need to enter our quiet house, where not warmth and comfort await me, but silence and indifference. This does not mean that Mark and I have constant quarrels or conflicts, nothing like that. I just feel like there's almost nothing connecting us anymore except a common address and a set of habits. After that cup of coffee with Cole, I decided to keep my distance. It seemed wrong to me to allow myself unnecessary thoughts, which began to appear more and more often as soon as I remembered his voice or smile. But paradoxically, it was this attempt to distance myself from Cole that intensified my feeling of emptiness when I returned home. I stopped finding at least some joy in my usual activities. I cooked dinner automatically, watched TV, rather just to fill the silence. Mark disappears at his construction sites, and we see each other only at late dinner or early breakfast, and then only for a few minutes. One evening, when he finally returned not too late, I decided to have a quiet conversation. I sat at the kitchen table, picking at the cold dinner with a fork. I don't remember what exactly I cooked. It seemed like pasta with sauce, but at that moment everything seemed equally tasteless. Mark came in, changed his shoes in the corridor, said a short hello, and sat down opposite me, reaching for the plate. "How are you?" I asked, trying to sound friendly. "Everything is as usual," he responded, glancing at the phone, which was persistently vibrating with incoming notifications. At the construction site, the delivery of timber was again delayed, so we had to sort it out. I nodded and drained the glass of water, trying to figure out how to approach the important question. "Aren't you tired? Maybe we should take a break this weekend?" I wanted to suggest, but Mark was looking at the smartphone screen, rereading some messages. I caught myself thinking that it doesn't even surprise me how absorbed he is in business. "Listen," I finally began, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. "We haven't had time to be together for a long time. It seems to me." I swallowed, feeling my heart clench inside. "I feel lonely." He looked up and frowned. "Is it true? Because of what?" I almost shuddered at his question. He really didn't understand how rarely we talk about anything other than bills or repairs. But I smoothed out the answer. "Yes, it's just. I want to talk so that you can ask how I am. And you are always busy with work. Even at home, you have only construction projects on your mind." Mark winced a little, as if he had not expected such a claim. "Grace, everyone does. Do you think other men don't need to work? Everyone spends as best they can." The words, "everyone is like this," seemed to hit me with an electric shock. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was easier for him to write everything off as a typical everyday routine than to try to change something. "Have you ever wondered if you are happy?" I asked. The voice trembled treacherously, and I tried to calm down. "How good are we both in this relationship? Grace, why are you wound up?" He waved it off with slight annoyance. "My project is on fire now. I can't drop everything and run with you to the beach or to a restaurant. This is life, you know. Every couple goes through this." I stared at him, feeling bitter despair growing inside. "He talks about some general things, but I'm not asking you to go on vacation now. I ask for your attention. Sorry, Mark, but I need more than the constant feeling that we are just two neighbors under the same roof." I didn't continue the conversation. I just got up from the table and went to wash the dishes. Mark seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and went deeper into texting on his phone or browsing construction forums. I wasn't even looking. My hands automatically moved under the stream of water, and the thought was pounding in my head. This is it. He doesn't even try to figure out what's bothering me. He doesn't see or hear me. In the following days, I tried to occupy myself with anything so as not to experience mental pain. In our office, it was just time for quarterly reports, and this meant an overload of papers. I buried myself in numbers, sat late into the night, reporting to Mr. Donovan, just to come home when Mark was already asleep. so as not to think about our endless omissions. But when the weekend came, the oppressive emptiness only intensified. If Mark took a day off, he most often still went to the construction site to see how things were going there, or tinkered with some paper contracts in his garage, calling it his work office. I methodically cleaned the house, bought groceries, and occasionally went for a short walk. But I felt that the house in which we once laughed, watched movies under the same blanket, and loved each other, had now turned into a place where I was like a guest. One day, I decided to speak to Mark directly, without half hints. That day, he returned in the evening, surprisingly cheerful, and even whistled some tune as he took off his work boots. I thought, since he's in a good mood, maybe I can at least get through to him now. Mark, I turned to him as he walked into the kitchen. Do I have a couple of minutes to talk? He nodded, looking almost peaceful. Certainly. What's happened? I want to understand what you expect from our marriage next. I knew the question sounded harsh, but I didn't want to lose the chance to speak out. It began to seem to me that you didn't care at all what was happening to me. But why doesn't matter. He shook his head in surprise. I brought money into the house. I fixed the roof when it was leaking. Isn't that enough? It's not about the money or the repaired roof. My throat was dry, and I found myself starting to raise my voice. You and I hardly talk. I don't feel like you're interested in what I'm doing. Mark sighed heavily, leaning his hands on the tabletop. Grace, you understand, you and I are adults. I have my own work, my own worries. Yes, I may not be perfect, but we have been together for many years. Can't we just accept that family is sometimes a routine? The word routine hit me again like a cold wind. I remembered Cole's words that I deserved better than to be part of someone else's routine, and suddenly I realized that Mark didn't think there was a problem. For him, this is the norm, but for me, it is a source of pain. Sometimes I don't know how we can get back to what was before. I exhaled, sinking into a chair. Maybe we have long forgotten how to be important to each other. Grace, Mark frowned, seemingly trying to find the right tone. I don't know what to say. If you feel so bad, go ahead, maybe. He stopped mid-sentence and waved his hand. In general, I don't see what exactly you want to change. He said this with such indifference that everything inside me broke. It seemed like he wasn't even trying to get into it. I understood that, specifically, I would like him to look at me not as a piece of household equipment, but as a person with his own feelings and fears. But at that moment, I realized he is either unable or does not want to do this. I stood up and left the kitchen, leaving him at a loss. She locked herself in the bathroom, turned on the water in the sink, and looked at her reflection in the mirror for a long time. Cole's words, Mark's gaze, emotionless answers were spinning in my head. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. But I didn't want to cry, rather. I wanted to scream, at least mentally. Why don't you understand me? Mark and I barely spoke for the next few days. He seemed to pretend that the conversation never happened. He probably considered it my temporary female hysteria. I tried to remain calm on the outside, but I couldn't find peace on the inside. I was increasingly gnawing at the thought. What if he's right? Maybe it's like this for everyone, and it's normal that over time everything in a marriage fades away except the joint budget. But then I remembered how I felt next to Cole alive, noticed, interesting. And I understood that this is also possible. You can speak and receive a response. One evening, when I was going to bed, Mark came into the bedroom, changed clothes, and lay down next to me without saying a word. His heavy breathing soon indicated that he had fallen asleep. I lay looking at the ceiling and felt empty and cold inside me, as if I was alone in a boundless dark space. Never before have I felt loneliness so acutely in the presence of another person. I fell asleep for a long time, turning over thoughts in my head about how it happened that our marriage had cracked. Once we looked at each other with love, but now I only see his gloomy face and constant haste. He obviously doesn't think it's a problem, but I increasingly can't accept it. But at the same time, I was scared. It's scary to imagine what might follow if we don't find a common language. The next morning, I got up with a heavy head. Mark had already left for work. At least he left a note on the table. Left early. See you in the evening. Mark. I held this piece of paper in my hands, as if trying to find at least a little warmth in it. But these were just letters that he had written mechanically, as if it were proof that we exist side by side, but not together. I didn't plan to stay in the gym late, but day after day, I feel like the gym has become an island for me where I can put my worries aside for at least an hour. Since my relationship with Mark began to crack, any activity brings, albeit small, relief. Especially if I see Cole there even from a distance, even just a couple of minutes between sets, or when he just smiles at me from his place at the counter. That evening, work delayed me. We were compiling reports in the office, and then I got into a small traffic jam. As a result, I ended up at the entrance to the base when most of the visitors had already left. I changed clothes in the locker room almost alone, without hearing the usual hubbub of voices. Still, I decided, okay, I'll do a short cardio session, a treadmill, and maybe a few abdominal exercises. And home. The light in the hall was a little dimmer than usual. Apparently, they turned on the economy mode as it was approaching closing time. I chose one of the free treadmills and began to walk steadily, gradually increasing the pace. There were only a couple of people in the room. Some were completing the last series of strength exercises. Cole, apparently, finished giving instructions to some man, then they shook hands, and the visitor headed towards the exit. Left alone, Cole looked around the spacious hall and noticed me. I caught his eye in the mirror in front of me. He smiled friendly, warm, but at the same time somehow piercing. My heart trembled, and I quickly looked away. A few minutes later, when I finished running, he came up and asked, "How do you like it? Isn't it a little late to train?" "Yes, a little," I admitted, catching my breath and wiping sweat from my forehead. Today, everything went wrong, but I wanted to calm my head at least a little. He nodded understandingly. There was silence, but there was no awkwardness in it, only some kind of tension, as if we were both drawn to say something else. I felt a warm excitement inside, as if I had a premonition that something was about to happen. 20 minutes left before closing, Cole said, glancing at the clock on his phone. I'm already thinking about how to close the hall. Today, the security guard got sick, so I'll close it myself. Understood. I'll finish soon. I don't want to keep you. Don't worry, he reassured, lightly touching my elbow. You can stretch a little. The main thing is that you don't leave in the dark later. I smiled. We walked together to the stretching area. I sat down on the mat, began to gently stretch the muscles of my legs, and Cole sat down next to me, showing me a couple of gentle exercises. Frankly, I didn't really concentrate on stretching. I felt his presence too much. She caught the aroma of men's perfume mixed with the smell of the gym, saw the tension in his hands as he demonstrated the next movement. Everything inside me froze. And suddenly the light went out. Suddenly, without warning, I involuntarily screamed. Darkness enveloped the hall like a black blanket. Almost immediately, the faint emergency lights in the corner flared on, casting long shadows. Wow, Cole muttered. It looks like the traffic jams have been knocked out. There must have been a short circuit somewhere. He stood up, groping along the floor for his phone, and I remained sitting on the mat. My heart rate went through the roof. The harsh darkness always unsettled me. Cole turned on the flashlight on his screen, directed the beam towards the doors, but half of the hall was still shrouded in the gloomy glow of emergency lamps. I'll try to figure it out now, he said, turning to me. Maybe it's just a line failure, I suggested, feeling how my brain began to react more sharply in the twilight. I heard my own breathing and heartbeat. It's quite possible, Cole agreed. Okay, go get your things for now. I'll try to quickly find out what's wrong, he said, and headed into the corridor to the electrical panel. I stood up, feeling my muscles a little cramping after the abrupt end of the stretch. She slowly walked towards the locker room, illuminating the path with the dim glare of the lamps, which flickered and then dimmed slightly. There was anxiety in my soul, and at the same time there was some kind of sharp spark inside. After all, Cole and I were essentially left alone in an almost empty building. The rest of the visitors had already left, and the administrator apparently left early. Finding my things in the darkened locker room turned out to be difficult. I pulled out my jacket and bag from the locker by touch. I saw my reflection in the mirror, vague, blurry, and noticed how my eyes were burning. What's happening to me flashed through my head. I felt both scared and excited. When I walked back into the hall, Cole was standing at the reception desk, typing something on his phone. He looked up and whispered, "I can't get through to the electricians. Probably the whole street is cut down or the line is overloaded. Maybe it's time to close and we'll get out of here," I suggested quietly. The voice sounded strange, as if my mouth was dry. "We'll have to do that. I'll walk you to the car, and at the same time I'll leave myself. Today, obviously, there won't be anyone," he replied, putting the phone in his pocket. "Just a minute, I'll just record the visit log." I nodded. We stood opposite each other, illuminated by only a couple of backup lamps. Shadows danced on the walls, giving the event an almost cinematic drama. For a second, I remembered all our recent conversations, how he listened to me, how he understood my experiences. And I thought, why is my heart beating so hard right now? Cole slowly approached me. There was something in his eyes that I had until now only noticed out of the corner of my eye, as if a warm anxiety mixed with craving. We stopped literally half a step from each other, almost touching each other's shoulders and chests. I felt his breathing, warm, slightly rapid, just like my own. "Grace," he said quietly, as if weighing every word. He paused, as if he didn't know if he had the right to speak further. My heart was beating like crazy. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. His hand carefully touched mine, our eyes met for a moment, and suddenly I felt his lips on my lips. It was not a long, passionate kiss, rather a timid touch, full of doubts, but from which everything inside me literally turned upside down. The moment was frozen in time. I felt his warmth, felt how he slightly squeezed my hand, and I realized that in these few moments there was all that closeness and tenderness that I had been missing for so long. But then, like a blade, the thought about my husband, about my marriage, about the fact that I was going beyond the boundaries of what was permitted, pierced me. I pulled back, pulled my hand away as if I had been burned, and took a step back. "Cole, I can't," escaped my lips, and I heard my voice tremble. His eyes darkened with regret or pain. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but I no longer gave him a chance. "I'm sorry," I said, and rushed to the exit, muffling the sobs that were already rising in my throat. The sneakers clattered muffled on the floor, and I ran, not making out the way, just to get out of this room as quickly as possible. With every second, waves of guilt, fear, and confusion overwhelmed me more and more. I didn't understand how it happened that I allowed this to happen, but deep down I knew this was not an accident, and this made it even more painful. I ran out into the street, where it was still semi-dark. The lights nearby were also turned off. Apparently, there was some kind of massive glitch. Hastily unlocking the car, I threw my bag on the seat and sat behind the wheel, feeling myself shaking. Through the windshield, I saw a faint light from the window of the base. It seemed that Cole did not immediately follow me. Maybe he was trying to find a way to get the electricity back, or he was just coming to his senses. When I started the engine, everything inside turned upside down with the desire to return, hug him, and justify this crazy impulse to myself. But I couldn't. I simply could not step over my own morality through the fear that I would completely destroy everything, even if it was unclear whether I would destroy a marriage that was already bursting at the seams, or whether I myself had long been destroyed. Having reached home almost mechanically, I drove the car along deserted streets, dimly lit by emergency lights. I parked without feeling my legs. Entering the house, I found it half dark. Probably the same problem with the electrical network had affected our area, and it was symbolic. Plunging into darkness, I seemed to be aware of my inner struggle. Everything was bubbling in my soul at once. Guilt before Mark, guilt before myself, a desperate desire to be loved, heard, burning alive from feelings that I cannot allow myself to show. I thought about Cole, about how his lips touched mine, and I understood that that moment in the semi-darkness was real, alive, sincere. But that's exactly what scared me. She groped her way to the bedroom and fell on the bed without turning on the light. I didn't know where Mark was. Maybe he was working late again. I was grateful to fate that I wouldn't have to explain to him now why my hands were shaking and why there were tears in my eyes. I tried to silence my panic by repeating, "It's just one mistake, just an impulse. Everything can still be fixed. You need to step back. Bring everything back." But deep inside, I understood. Nothing could be returned to its previous state. That brief moment when Cole and I touched each other was a major point of no return. Even if we never do this again, even if I never let him get close again, I already know that my heart can beat so hard when I am noticed, understood, desired. And I won't lie to myself that it doesn't matter. Lying in the dark, I let the tears run down my cheeks. Let this be my payment for that short, but such a poignant moment. Tomorrow everything will continue work, home, trying to be a faithful wife who is not looking for affairs. But today I find myself in the midst of an internal war, between guilt and fear, between a sense of duty and a desperate thirst for love. And perhaps I do not have the strength to defeat either of these sides. Mark went on a business trip for a week. He announced his plans suddenly, a couple of days before departure, but I didn't ask any unnecessary questions. Deep down, I even wanted to be left alone so that I could properly sort out my thoughts. Over the past couple of months, it seems like my whole life has gone downhill. Eternal disagreements with my husband, the emptiness that settles inside me, and that short kiss with Cole that turned my mind upside down. When Mark left, the house became strangely quiet. I realized that before that we still had some semblance of movements and words, albeit reduced to a minimum. And now I wandered through the rooms and felt as if I was in a hotel room. Everything was familiar, but did not give a feeling of comfort. Even when I put on the kettle or flipped through TV channels, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. On the third evening of my loneliness, I suddenly realized that I had not gone for morning runs for a long time, the same ones that I once loved so much for their ability to clear my head. In addition, I remembered that Cole sometimes goes for short runs with his clients in nature, especially if the weather permits. Well, why not? I said to myself, feeling the emergence of courage. I wrote him a short message. "Hi, Cole. I want to go for a run tomorrow morning in the park by the river. Will you be there? I heard that you sometimes organize races on weekends." The text came out sparingly, but I didn't want to ask for a personal meeting. Although, to be honest, it was a personal meeting that I wanted. The answer came quickly. "Hi, Grace. Yes, I plan to be there by 7 in the morning. Join us." I smiled at the phone as if I had received an invitation to a party, but then I reminded myself that this was just a jog. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, threw on comfortable leggings and a hoodie, quickly drank a glass of water, and went to the park located by the river on the outskirts of our city. When I arrived, the sky above the treetops was brightening. The sun was just beginning to break through the light haze. The cool aroma of fallen leaves and damp earth hung in the air. Near the entrance to the park, I saw Cole. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest and talked to someone he knew on the phone. Noticing me, he interrupted the conversation and waved his hand in greeting. Something jumped inside me at the sight of his smile, both joy and a shadow of embarrassment from what happened between us in the gym. "Good morning," he said as I came closer. "How did you sleep?" "Not bad," I lied. In fact, I slept poorly, but now I didn't want to burden him with my sleepless nights. "I see you've already warmed up." "Stretched a little. I thought that no one except me would appear so early. Glad you decided to join." He spoke in a calm voice without a hint of awkwardness, and this reassured me. We started jogging along the park path, discussing an easy route along the river. At first, we behaved formally, talking about the weather, office routine, and little things like buying new sneakers. But after a few minutes of running, the tension seemed to melt away in the cool autumn air. I began to feel freer. After running a couple of kilometers, we stopped to catch our breath. A light fog hung over the river. The trees rustled quietly, shedding bright yellow leaves. Cole handed me a bottle of water. Hold it. How's your morning? Great, I admitted. I've already forgotten how pleasant it is to feel the pulse and the fresh wind on your face. He smiled and, looking at me, asked, "What are your plans for the day, since you're out of the office?" I shrugged. "There are no special ones. Mark is on a business trip. I thought maybe I should go shopping or stay at home. But now," I looked around, inhaling the spicy smell of leaves. Suddenly, I wanted to spend the day in the fresh air. Cole put the bottle on the bench. "You know, I don't want to go back to the stuffy hall or home either. It's my day off today, and I plan to take a walk around the neighborhood. Maybe you can join me." I felt a warmth flare up inside. Of course, I understood that any time alone with Cole was extremely dangerous for me in an emotional sense. But at the same time, this is exactly what I desperately craved, to be with someone who makes me feel like I'm alive. "Why not?" I said, trying not to show the inner trembling in my voice. "Where are we going?" "There's a place in the forest, not far from here," Cole said, looking into my eyes. "There is a small path leading to the lake." We returned to the cars and got into his pickup truck. After some hesitation, I finally agreed, leaving my car in the parking lot near the park. And 10 minutes later, we were already rolling along a narrow road lined with trees, whose branches intertwined at the top, forming almost a tunnel of autumn foliage. Getting out of the car, we went deeper into the forest. The path became more and more a path, wet stones and roots, slippery fallen leaves. Cole helped me, offering his hand if there was a particularly steep section, and I, without meaning to, increasingly felt his proximity. But surprisingly, it was not an agonizing tension, as in the hall then, but rather a natural joy when they help you. "Look," he suddenly said, pointing forward. I raised my head and saw a small lake with clear water, in which the red crowns of the trees were reflected. A light mist spread over the surface, and the whole picture looked almost magical. We came out to a small ledge with a good view of the water and sat down on a fallen tree. Cole took a thermos and a couple of mugs out of his backpack and poured some coffee. I didn't even suspect that he took all this with him. "Help yourself," he said, handing me a hot, aromatic drink. "Thank you," I thanked, feeling my throat constrict with a surge of emotions. It seemed to me that all this was a dream. We sat talking quietly, and I periodically caught myself not wanting to return to reality. I listened to Cole talk about his family, his parents who live on the other side of the state, his sister, whom he sees less often than he would like. I reciprocated, told what my life was like before marriage, how I studied at the university, how I loved to while away my time reading books and dreamed of becoming a journalist. "It's never too late, you know," Cole said when I admitted that I had given up my dream for reliable accounting. "Probably," I agreed, but in my heart I understood that it would not be so easy to break out of the usual shackles. The sun rose higher, piercing the thinning crowns of trees with warm rays. When the thermos ran out of coffee, we decided to take a walk along the shore of the lake. At some point, I caught myself laughing without contrition, without falsehood, just laughing at some funny stories from Cole's life. I laugh as if I were 20 again, and no problems were hanging over me. Soon we returned to the car, and I realized I didn't want to end this day yet. Cole seemed to read my thoughts and suggested, "Maybe we can go to some eatery. Let's have lunch, otherwise coffee and cookies won't last long." I agreed. We found a roadside cafe overlooking the same river along which we ran in the morning. We ordered simple sandwiches and sat by the window, chatting about everything in a row, about recent films, about how the traditional autumn festival was coming to the city. I felt an incredible sense of freedom. For the first time in many months, I didn't think about what Mark was going to say, didn't expect sidelong glances, didn't try to please someone. When we finished eating, we stayed for a few more minutes at an unoccupied table because we didn't want to run away. Cole looked at me as if he saw all my anxieties and secrets, but did not judge them, but carefully accepted them. I was at the same time calm and terrified because I understood that with every minute in his company my heart was thawing more and more. "Thank you for this day," I said when we were already outside. I don't remember the last time I walked like this and breathed deeply. Mutually, Grace. This is important for me too, he answered quietly. We exchanged glances, and for a short moment I felt like everything inside was breaking off from the desire to succumb to the impulse and cuddle up to him. But remembering what happened in the gym and what feelings followed, I lowered my eyes in time. I don't want to run on the edge of my emotions again, although the conflicting urge to touch him has become almost unbearable. Taking me back to the park, to my car, Cole looked after me and smiled. If you want to repeat it, I'm always happy. Thank you for spending the day with me. I got into my car, and we were separated by two windows, two doors. There was a strange mixture of lightness and melancholy in my soul. I was truly happy for those few hours, forgetting about my devastating reality. But at the same time, I clearly understood. Mark would return, and I would have to face everything that I was now running from. The day after our walk, I felt as if I was standing on the threshold of some kind of decision, and at the same time, I did not know what step to take. In the morning, when I woke up, the house was still empty. Mark was still on a business trip, and his absence painfully reminded me that our relationship was turning into a formality. I walked along the corridor barefoot, feeling the cool floor under my feet, and thought that I had not felt such dizzying freedom for a long time, and at the same time terrible fear. It's as if I'm equal parts attracted and terrified by the possibilities that might arise if I change my routine. By lunchtime, I was distracted by household chores. I sorted out the winter clothes that were still lying in the pantry, went through a box of documents, and finally neatly folded the papers for reports. Such small chores helped keep my hands occupied so that my head would not wander into lengthy thoughts about the future. But as soon as I sat down and froze for a minute, the image of Cole popped up in my mind. His kind look, warm palms when he helped me get off the rock in the forest, a quiet whisper when we had frivolous conversations, and that short kiss from which everything inside me still shrinks. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the phone rang. I even flinched in surprise, then I walked up and saw Cole's name on the screen. My heart immediately started racing. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Grace, hi. I was wondering if you'd like." He stopped mid-sentence. "Would you like to go for a walk this evening or have some coffee? If you're free, of course." I hesitated for a couple of seconds. My mind screamed, "Don't complicate the situation," and my heart quietly fluttered. Why not? In the end, I gave in to my heart. "I can get out," I said, trying not to show my joy. "Perhaps by 5. "Great. Then we'll meet near the same cafeteria by the river. Remember, we've been there before." "Yes, see you later," I answered and hung up, again feeling guilty and happy at the same time. When I arrived at that same cafeteria, the sun was already setting, playing on the water with reflections of orange and pink. The air was cool, autumnal, and smelled of red leaves that had almost completely fallen from the trees. Cole waited at the entrance, leaning against the railing. When he saw me, he waved his hand and smiled, and I caught myself that everything in me was smiling back, both soul and body. We ordered 2 lattes and walked out with paper glasses onto the embankment where the walking path was. People around were hurrying about their business, couples were walking, but I practically didn't notice them. All my attention was focused on the man next to me. We talked about little things and laughed. Sometimes, when I fell silent, Cole looked at me with a calm warmth, which at the same time attracted me more than any loud confession. "Listen, Grace," he said suddenly when we moved a little to the side, away from the crowd. "Don't you think things have become very complicated?" I nodded silently, squeezing the glass in my fingers. Warm drops of coffee touched the lid. Of course, I also felt like I was being torn apart from the inside. But what could she answer? "I understand that we are in limbo," he continued. "We met at the wrong time and under the wrong circumstances. You have a family in which well, I don't want to get into details, but you're unhappy." I looked at him. There was anxiety in his eyes, and with it caution, as if he was afraid of hurting me with his directness, but he could no longer pretend that everything was fine. "It's not just about family," I breathed. I myself don't understand what I want. I'm afraid to admit it even to myself. He took a small sip of coffee, then looked into my eyes and asked a question that stopped me in my tracks. Are you happy, Grace? Everything inside was broken. The simplest and most difficult question in the world to which I did not know how to answer. Am I happy? If it were just a matter of marriage, one could say no, but it goes deeper than that. It seems to me that I lost myself much earlier than I realized it, and now I don't understand where to look for Grace who knew how to dream and enjoy life. I stood and was silent, feeling my eyes begin to sting treacherously. Finally, I found the strength to answer. Don't know. Probably not. But the problem is that I'm not sure if I can ever be happy again. Cole wanted to touch my hand, but I reflexively pulled away, afraid that any touch would cause another wave of confusion in me. He understood the gesture, but was not offended. He just pursed his lips and said, happiness is an unpredictable thing, and sometimes it's important to just allow yourself to be honest with yourself. I'm trying, I whispered, but every time I think about the fact that Mark and I have no future, I am overcome with fear. What if I make a terrible mistake, leaving the house, the person with whom I lived for a decade? Suddenly, all these feelings that I have now for you. I stopped short when I saw the pain flash in Cole's eyes from my words. Tell me, he asked quietly. I, I'm afraid that this is just my escape from myself, from my emptiness, I finished, gathering my will into a fist. I understand that you are dear to me and give me something that has not been in my relationship for a long time. But what if I wake up one day and realize that this is just a short fling and I was deceiving myself? Cole didn't object, didn't try to convince me. He just nodded, as if agreeing that this was possible, and said, I don't have a ready answer either. I feel like I want to be close to you. He looked away so as not to overwhelm me with this frankness. But I don't want to and can't do it at any cost. It is important that you decide for yourself what is best for you. For several long seconds, we were again plunged into tense silence. Two teenagers walked past us with loud music in their headphones, then an elderly couple talking about something of their own, and we stood as if in the center of other people's lives, trying to understand what was happening on our own. I took another sip of coffee, which had already cooled down. The sky above the river was dull gray and promised a close sunset. Evening is about to come, and I will have to return to the empty house, where I am my own mistress and my own jailer. I can't give up everything just yet, I finally admitted in a trembling voice. I can't just leave Mark without figuring out what we have left, why we grew so distant. Maybe we can find some form of coexistence, but I'm just confused. I understand, Cole replied quietly, and I even think it's right to sort it out. It's better than flailing around in helplessness. But I can't run away from myself either, I added, feeling tears welling up in my throat. I need to understand where I lost myself and how I can get my life back, my joy, and not just love or marriage. Cole touched my shoulder so gently that I barely felt the touch. But there was so much support in him that I could hardly hold back my tears. I wanted to bury my face in his shoulder and cry, but I understood this would not solve anything. I'll be there if you let me, he said quietly. I won't demand decisions from you. Just know that you are not alone, Grace. I nodded, and without saying a word, we walked back to the cafeteria to throw away the paper cups. Cole then offered to take me to the car, and I agreed. On the way, we hardly spoke, each immersed in our own thoughts. When we approached my car, I turned around. Thank you, I whispered, for your frankness, for not putting pressure, not forcing you to take hasty steps. Take care of yourself, he said. There was sadness and hope in his voice at the same time. I looked into his eyes, but realized that I couldn't even hug him now. There were too many contradictions inside. She just got behind the wheel, closed the door, and drove away, feeling her heart beating at a frantic pace. I sat on the sofa all evening with a cup of tea, turning over Cole, Mark, and, most importantly, myself in my head. Am I happy? This question rang in my memory, making me painfully aware. The answer is negative. But now I at least admitted it out loud, and perhaps it is in this recognition that lies the first step towards finding myself, even if I am not yet ready to give up everything and leave. I knew this conversation should have happened a long time ago. After returning from a run alone, I spent the entire evening trying to prepare myself to talk directly to Mark. No more hints, excuses, or half silences. I wanted to express everything about my loneliness, about the fact that I no longer feel happy in this marriage. And although anxiety was seething inside me, I understood. I couldn't put it off any longer. Mark returned from a business trip tired, but, as always, immersed in his business. We talked little in the first days after his arrival. He immediately went into reports, estimates, and phone calls. I saw that he was exhausted, but out of old habit, I didn't ask anything he himself didn't start sharing, and I didn't have the strength to press. However, already on the second evening of his presence at home, when he finally emerged from telephone conversations, I caught the moment. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, trying to remain calm. He turned around, slightly surprised by my tone. "Of course," he said as if absent-mindedly, but I saw how his shoulders tensed. Apparently, he already felt that something was brewing. We moved into the living room, where I sat on the sofa, and he sat opposite me on the armchair. The room was not so bright, the autumn gloom outside the window mixed with the soft light of the table lamp. I took a breath, looked into his eyes, and began. "Mark, I don't feel like we're okay. More precisely, I think we both understand it." I paused, gathering my strength. "I don't feel happy anymore." He seemed to tense even more, but did not look away. "What do you mean?" he asked, although there were notes of anxiety in his voice, not misunderstanding. "We are completely distant," I continued, clasping my fingers in my knees so that they would not tremble. "Sometimes I feel like we're just two neighbors paying the same bills. You disappear at work and don't ask how I am. And when I tried to talk about it, you answered, 'Everyone is like this,' or 'This is life, deal with it.' But I don't want to put up with it if it means living without warmth and intimacy." He was silent for a couple of seconds, then sighed quietly. "I understand that I haven't been the best husband lately. It's just—" He rubbed his forehead as if trying to get rid of a headache. "It's not that simple, Grace. I didn't want to burden you with my problems, but apparently this only alienated us even more." I looked at him point blank. "What problems? You never talked about anything other than delays in construction materials and projects. I really don't know what's bothering you so much, and I'm tired of guessing." Mark lowered his eyes, pressing his lips into a thin line. He looked frightened, as if deep down he understood that if he didn't tell the truth now, he would lose me completely. He began, but then fell silent, as if words were not enough. "All these years the business has been hanging by a thread," he finally said, swallowing hoarsely. "I'm in debt. Seriously in debt, Grace. And I couldn't handle them alone, but I was afraid that if I told you, you'd be worried, or you'd think I was a failure. And I'm too proud to show that I can't cope." My heart sank painfully. I tried to realize that I really didn't know anything about his current financial situation. He always assured me that everything was under control when I asked about some big expenses or why he was so nervous about deadlines. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, feeling offended. "We are a married couple. We should have decided such things together." Mark forced a bitter smile. "I guess I hoped that I would solve everything myself. Then it will show that I am a real man, capable of providing for my family. And if I told you that I got into debt and the business could collapse, you would." He fell silent, as if not daring to finish. "In general, I thought that I was protecting you." I sighed, closing my eyes. Now several feelings were fighting inside me at once. Confusion, anger because I had been lied to, burning pity for him, because he had been carrying this burden for so long, and, strangely, some semblance of sympathy. It turned out that all these years he hid behind work, not only because he was a workaholic, but also out of fear of remaining insolvent. And I, in turn, perceived this as indifference towards me. "But do you understand that we both almost lost each other because of this?" I asked quietly. What, by hiding your problems, did you push me away even more? Yes, he answered, covering his eyes with his hand. I understand. Sorry, I thought this would save us from scandals, but it only turned out worse. I looked into his face, and for the first time in a long time, I saw sincere emotions. They're not irritation, not fatigue, but fear and pain. He was really afraid of losing the business, and now it seemed like he was afraid of losing me too. The pause dragged on, and I felt like the room was getting crowded with our unexpressed feelings. Why did you decide to say this now? I finally asked. Mark ran his hand over the stubble on his chin. The moment you said that you didn't feel happy, I realized that this was no longer a temporary female insult. I'm losing you. And then I thought, either I'll be honest or that's it, it's over. I didn't want it to end because of my pride. I continued to look into his eyes, trying to understand my own feelings. This confession explained a lot, but did not relieve my pain and disappointment. I still felt like years had passed in vain, that we lived like neighbors without sharing the most important things. And at the same time, a contradictory feeling grew in me. Is it now possible to fix what has been destroyed for so long? I don't know what to do next, Mark, I said honestly. I tried to tell you that I felt bad, but you didn't hear. Maybe I myself didn't express myself entirely correctly, but we missed it for too long. Grace, I understand, but I want to try to fix everything. He sat up in his chair, as if gathering determination. If for this, I need to show you all the accounts, the entire business situation, please. I want you to know what's going on. I looked away, looking at the floor, wondering if my fatigue and despair would not disappear overnight just because he told the truth. But at least it's no longer a dead end with both of us beating around the bush. Now sitting in front of me was a frightened man who, for the first time in many years, was sincere. Let's do this, I said carefully. Show me everything. Tell us what your obligations are, what risks you have. I'm an accountant myself. Maybe I can help draw up a plan. But I don't promise that everything will work out between us right away. I need time to understand if there is still a way to save our marriage. He nodded with an understanding look. Thank you. I'm glad you're at least willing to listen and help. And I'm sorry again for letting it all go this way. Forgive me too for not guessing earlier, I said, unexpectedly even for myself. Maybe if I hadn't focused on the fact that I wasn't being noticed, but had directly asked why you were so immersed, we wouldn't have come to this. A shadow of a sad smile crossed Mark's face. Yes, we are both to blame. But if we want to fix something, we still have a chance, right? I didn't answer yes or no. I just kept silent because there was confusion in my soul. On the one hand, it touched me that Mark opened up and showed vulnerability. On the other hand, I lived too long in a state of coldness and alienation. This does not happen in one conversation. We fell silent, and in this silence I felt relief mixed in its own way with aching sadness. It was getting dark outside the windows, and the sound of the wind from the street became clearly audible in the room. I even shuddered. Our conversation turned out to be so tense, but there was no longer that oppressive emptiness that reigned between us for a long time. Instead, questions, doubts, heaviness appeared, but at least it was obvious and not hidden behind silence. I'll show you the accounts tomorrow, Mark said after a pause, getting up from his chair to take off his jacket. You're right, we need to put everything together and think about what to do next. I was already planning to go to a lawyer, but maybe we can find a way out together. Okay, I nodded, feeling weak throughout my body from emotional stress. Thank you for talking to me, he said quietly, looking as if with hope. I understand that I let everything go really well. I didn't answer, I just lowered my eyes. The conversation took place seriously, but I felt that this was only the beginning of a long journey on which we would have to solve not only material problems, but also restore lost trust. And I was not at all sure that we would have enough strength and desire to complete it to the end. However, for the first time in a long time, looking at Mark, I saw not an indifferent workaholic, but a man who was terrified of losing both his business and his wife. And perhaps it was the awareness of his fear that opened up in me the desire to at least try to hear him in a way that he had never heard me all these years. I sat for a long time on the old sofa in the living room, turning over all the recent events in my head. Fatigue enveloped me like a blanket, but not the kind that comes from work or lack of sleep, but a deep fatigue from internal fluctuations, from endless thoughts about what is right and what is wrong. After the conversation, Mark tried to share plans, show accounts, and tell how we can save the business, but I put all this off until tomorrow. Today, I needed to be alone with myself. Why has everything become so difficult? Mark and I once dreamed of simple family happiness, laughed at any difficulties, and believed that the whole world was in our hands. But life, it turns out, knows how to set traps. Work, bills, debts, understatement, gradually they came between us, and we didn't notice how we stopped seeing each other. The warmth faded, and we became strangers, although we lived under the same roof. Cole. I remembered all our conversations, his understanding, warm touches, that short kiss in the semi-darkness that made me shudder. For a long time, I believed that I was drawn to him because I was unhappy in my marriage, but I understood. He played a more important role. He helped me understand that I was still alive, that I still had the ability to feel brightly, deeply, sincerely, but I still couldn't allow myself to call it full-fledged love or confidently leave Mark for Cole, because deep down I felt that if I made a choice out of fear of staying in an empty marriage, then I would again be acting against my conscience. I had to choose not between them, but first of all, to choose myself. When I finally had some clarity inside, I got up, walked down the hallway to the bedroom, and fumbled for the phone. Perhaps I should say some important words to Cole. He answered almost immediately, as if he was waiting for my call. "Grace, everything is fine?" he asked. There was both anxious expectation and hope in his voice. I took a breath and tried to speak softly, calmly. "Hello, Cole. Yes, everything is fine. I just wanted to say thank you for being there at the most difficult moment when I felt invisible and unnecessary." "I'm glad I could help," he replied, seeming to contain his excitement. "But what happens now?" I fell silent for a moment, watching the moonlight fall on the curtain. A strange mixture of sadness and relief grew in my chest. "What's happening is what I realized. I can't live out of fear anymore," I finally said. "And I can't build relationships until I figure myself out. I don't want to run from one problem to another. I don't want to make a choice in favor of someone simply because I don't see a way out. I need to learn to be myself again." There was a short silence on the other end. I imagined Cole sighing, trying to find the words, and suddenly he said quietly, "I respect your choice, Grace, and if you ever need support, I'm here for you. But I won't force you to do anything you're not ready for." "Thank you," I whispered, feeling the tears stinging my eyes. "You are a very good person. I don't know where all this will lead, but your sincerity was important to me." We said goodbye, and I felt like a knot inside me that had been holding my heart loosened. Of course, there was still pain, the pain of the fact that we might not be able to check with Cole what could have happened if we had met at a different time and under different circumstances. But I also felt freedom. Now I don't feel like I'm betraying myself or Mark or all of us together. Then I went into the bedroom and found Mark there. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with papers in his hands, clearly trying to prepare for our analysis of the accounts tomorrow. I didn't expect him to return from work so early because sometimes he could stay up late. When he looked up at me, I saw wariness in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, as if with fear that I would start talking about divorce or separation again. "Yes," I answered. "I'm just tired. We still have a big conversation to be had about debt and business rescue plans, but let's do it tomorrow, okay?" He put down the papers and nodded. "Certainly. I also need to digest everything we talked about." I stopped for a moment, looking at him. Before, I didn't notice how much weight he had lost, how his forehead was furrowed with deep wrinkles, and silver strands appeared in his hair. Perhaps I wanted to blame him for all my troubles, but now I saw. He was also driven by the situation and his own pride. And this does not cancel my pain, but it makes me understand that he, too, is tired of living in eternal fear, only his fear is different. The fear of failure, bankruptcy, disappointment. I wanted to say, I don't guarantee that we can restore our relationship to the way it was. I don't know if we'll stay together. But the words never left my lips. Instead, I turned off the overhead light, hiding the room in partial shade, and hid in the bathroom to shower and calm my thoughts. Mark sits next to me in the cramped hallway of the family clinic. The first session with a psychologist awaits us ahead. When we walked inside, I noticed a faint smell of coffee and a slightly chemical smell of disinfection, typical of small medical facilities. The waiting room is light and quiet, but emotions are still raging inside me from mild anxiety to strange determination. I steal a glance at Mark. He seems calm, but from the way he purses his lips and absent-mindedly twirls the phone in his hands, I understand that he is no less worried inside. We took this step together, and it's still a little crazy for me to realize that once we both thought that everyone is like this, routine, understatement, debt, lack of mutual understanding, it turned out that no, not everyone, and we decided if there is even the slightest chance to regain trust, then we must use it. I remember how a week ago Mark and I were sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by papers and calculations. He admitted that the debt situation is critical, but not hopeless if restructuring is approached correctly. I delved into the columns of numbers, not trying to think any more about which of us could be reproached. The only thing that really mattered was to see if we could walk this path together, and this applies not only to finances, but also to our marriage. "What do you say, Grace?" he asked then, looking at me confused. "I can help with the reports and the payment plan," I replied, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "But we will have to talk about more than just money. If we want to try again, we need to figure out what drove us so far apart. And without outside help, I'm afraid we won't be able to cope." Mark was silent for a moment and nodded. "Do you mean family therapy?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I don't believe that by will alone we will suddenly regain intimacy. We've been keeping things quiet for too long." For me, this was the first honest statement. If we want any hope, we should go to a psychologist together. Mark and I had previously thought about consulting with a specialist, but every time there were excuses: no time, no money, why wash dirty linen in public? Now I saw that he, like me, was afraid of the final collapse, which means he was ready for change. Maria Mason, counseling psychologist, reads the sign on the door. A nice middle-aged woman comes out to meet us. She has a friendly smile, short hair, and a soft look that calms you down. We go into the office together, a small but cozy room with two armchairs opposite the sofa. There are neutral pictures of the coast on the walls and a soft carpet on the floor. "Nice to meet you," says Maria, gesturing for us to sit down. "Tell us in a few words what you came with." Me and Mark look at each other. I decide to start. "We've been married for over 10 years, but lately everything has gone downhill. We are both going through a crisis, debts appeared, problems at work, and we realized that we had moved away from each other so much that I hesitate for a moment, remembering all the pain of the last months. I even thought that I could no longer live with Mark. But you decided to give marriage a chance." Maria clarifies, looking at us in turn. "Yes," Mark says, swallowing. "We decided that before we throw everything away, we need to figure it out." He glances at me briefly. I feel this subtle prick in my chest. We really decided together. But this does not mean that we have 100% confidence. Rather, we have a mutual desire to understand whether something alive remains between us. The session lasts about an hour, but it seems like an eternity has passed. I'm talking about how long it seemed to me that I was an empty place in Mark's life, how I missed his attention. Mark admits that he had been panicking for many years about debts and the possibility of losing his business, and out of pride he could not show it, even to me. Our psychologist asks direct questions, tries to figure out what we feel for each other now. Is it resentment, guilt, fear, or still warm feelings? When I leave the office, I feel like I've come out of a long confession. Mark and I look at each other, and in his gaze I see a reflection of the same fatigue, but also a faint glimmer of hope. We may have only taken a micro step forward, but it is a step we both consciously chose. When is the next time? Mark asks quietly, looking at me, not at the psychologist. We can continue in a week, Maria suggested, having managed to look at her diary. Yes, let's do it that way, I agree. It seems important to me that we plan to go to therapy together and not separately. Already in the evening at home, I am sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, looking at the cover of the book on psychology that Maria gave us to read. Street lights come on outside the window. The sound of Mark's steps is heard in the corridor. He is looking for something in the closet, rummaging through the drawers, putting down his tools. He needs to go to the facility tomorrow, but he returned early so that we could discuss how we should live further. I think about many things. First of all, that I no longer have the illusion that our long-term wounds can be healed in one day. I don't expect an instant transformation from Mark, and I myself don't want to pretend that everything is normal. But I don't want to run at random, as I once thought that only someone else would save me from loneliness, who would give me a feeling of fullness of life. Now I know that the most important thing is to understand yourself, regain respect and warmth, and only then build a relationship with a second person. I remember saying goodbye to Cole. It was a difficult conversation because I admitted that I do not want and cannot plunge into a new relationship right now. Cole was very understanding, and I felt a huge sense of relief. He thanked me for being sincere, and I thanked him for once again helping me feel that I was still alive and capable of love. Our paths could have turned out differently, but I chose to stay with Mark. Or rather, I chose myself and decided to try to find myself in a couple that had already lived together for 10 years, but now on different terms, without fear, without lies, and without silence. Grace, Mark comes out of the corridor, holding several envelopes and some kind of notebook in his hands. I found something here I decided to show you. These are my old posts from when I was just starting out in business. I wanted to tell you that. Maybe we should look through them together. I look at him and notice how he awkwardly tries to take the initiative by inviting me into his world. Previously, I would have been ironic or shrugged it off, but now I understand. This is his way of saying, I want you to be aware, I want us to take steps together. It may be a tiny step, but it's an important one. Come on, I answer, getting up from the sofa. I just wanted to talk about what Maria said about joint planning. This concerns not only debt, but also our time. Mark nods, and we go into the living room together to spread the papers on the table. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like we're just neighbors under the same roof. We sit side by side, discuss, share. We speak quietly, sometimes argue, but without aggression. This nightly work with documents and stories written in Mark's notebook becomes the first stone in the bridge that we are trying to build anew. I know that everything can go wrong at any moment. We have no guarantees. And yet there is a quiet determination within me. If we have come to the realization that we both want to try again, then we need to at least try to walk this path honestly. Family therapy is only part of a long process. The main thing will be our mutual desire to change, speak, and hear. Perhaps someday we will remember this day and understand that right now we have started something new. No longer to those carefree feelings that were in youth, but to a more mature union in which both joys and problems are discussed together. While we are sitting over the papers and I am correcting the next number with a red pen, Mark suddenly carefully places his palm on top of mine. I look up at him. There is no usual chill in his gaze. There is fatigue, anxiety, but also some kind of warm, thank you. In response, I slightly squeeze his fingers, knowing that it is unlikely that we will be able to regain everything lost in one evening, but this is a movement towards him. And this is enough for me now to stay close and try to rebuild our life. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.